This is a Brighter Futures film about how ideas improve lives and change policy. It's a great pleasure to welcome Gina Reinhardt from the Department of Government here at the University of Essex, whose expertise is in disasters, social infrastructure, the global north and the global south, how we can learn lessons from that, and how, in a sense, we can design places to be better for people and understand when things go wrong. Would that be about right, Gina, for your kind of research? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, that's about right. What I like to think about and try to find solutions for are the really core problems of sustainability and resilience. And resilience is the ability to adapt to and bounce back from unexpected shocks. And often the way that resilience is enhanced is by having resources. The resources that most people think about are things like money and physical infrastructure, right, buildings. But the resources that I think about are people and social resources and connectedness, happiness, things that make people and help people work together to recover from these things. And with the end goal being sustainability, that means not using all the resources today so that some are left for future generations. So that's my ultimate goal.
And those resources have changed over time, the social resources, the things that people can draw on from others, the togetherness of communities. In some places those have become fractured and damaged, and in other places they've been built up again. So tell us a little bit about how those things in certain circumstances have got worse or have got better through direct intervention.
Well, so in the UK today, the connectedness of communities is not as great as it was at one time. And some of the things that we try to do to enhance that connectedness are programs like the social prescribing program. This is a new way of thinking about healthcare. It's kind of a health coaching scheme where a social prescriber and a participant in the program think about and talk about what matters to the participant, what they want to get out of life, and try to think of ways that a person can marshal their own resources, their own strength, their own resolve, their own emotions, and the people in their lives to achieve the goals that they want in life. And often that does involve extending oneself past typical connections and becoming more connected to the community in general.
So people are arriving at a general practitioner's, at a doctor's surgery, and somebody is saying, well, you know what, perhaps we don't have a medical solution for you, but we have a social solution.
That's
in a sense.
Exactly right.
So it's diverting people into what sorts of things? I mean, you know, is it kind of dance classes? Is it music? Is it community gardens?
Sure, it's all of those things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of signposting, like you say, but in true social prescribing, there's also sort of a walk that the social prescriber takes with the participant for several weeks. And sometimes that involves actually physically accompanying someone to a new activity or a place. Sometimes it's more introducing people to each other or introducing the participant to organizations and resources that can help them. And it could involve, it depends on what the person really wants to get for their lives, but it could be gardening and community gardening in particular. It could be cookery clubs. It could be help with housing associations and benefits, statutory benefits. It could be help connecting to family members that are, you know, perhaps estranged and really causing someone a lot of anxiety. And it could be connecting to mental health services or other things that someone needs. It's a lot of discerning what someone wants to achieve and then helping them take control of achieving it.
So you've studied disasters a lot. So those are kind of sudden events that cause fracturing of relationships and need these sorts of things building up over time. But then there are also slow processes like like the emergence of loneliness in affluent countries, which would have been kind of unheard of or unthought of, but now is clearly something that is not just a kind of technical issue. It changes people's lives. It affects their longevity. It affects their happiness and so forth. So sometimes the processes are slow, sometimes they're sudden. How are they kind of playing out when you start to think about how do we intervene to make things better?
Well, the difference between a slow onset disaster and a rapid onset disaster in the terms that you're asking about really is that we have to deal with those differently in terms of the policies and interventions. Rapid onset disasters are what we typically think of as natural disasters, but they're not really natural always in that sense. A gas explosion is a rapid onset disaster, right? A bridge collapsing, the Grenfell Tower fires. These are things that we prepare for often in the abstract, and we are supposed to have systems in place to handle these things. The slow onset disasters are things that sort of sneak up on us and that often we don't appreciate the magnitude of until they are already of great magnitude. Sometimes we can see them coming, right? A drought that we know is going to persist for years based on El Nino and other meteorological forces, we know in some countries could lead to famine and malnourishment, and we can see that disaster coming. But other times we can't, such as the loneliness. Some people have definitely seen loneliness coming, but it's not been, as you say, it's not been in the public conscience, it's not been part of the national conversation. And that means that the methods of confronting it have to be a little different because they have to include awareness. Whereas rapid onset disasters, people are aware of
you naturally know
pretty quickly,
yes,
right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right.
So press a little bit into kind of loneliness, that people living alone are under certain kind of social and cultural stresses, but medical and care services are trying to design ways to help them. I mean, it's not everyone who is alone is lonely, so
That's
kind
right.
of accept that point. But what about the kind of Internet of Things? You've looked at how we can be thinking about new technology to help people
Right.
in various ways.
Right.
How's that kind of playing
So
out?
when we think about the Internet of Things, this is sort of sensors, right? Remote sensors that relay information to a central location. So if you have Alexa or Siri or any other sort of mechanism that it doesn't look at you, doesn't know what you look like, doesn't know in general anything about you, but can use algorithms to deduce patterns in your life. When do you normally get up and start moving around? When do you normally make a cup of tea? Things like that. These are the sorts of sensors that are being used right now and being sort of piloted, tested in places like sheltered housing, where somebody does live alone. And we are responsible as a society and a government for checking on these people, but in general, without any reason to think that anything's wrong, each person gets checked on once a week. You know, your time may be Thursday at 2 p.m. roughly. My time may be Monday at 9 a.m. And if something happens to me on Monday at 11 a.m., you may not know for a week, right? I may be not, maybe I'm lonely or not, but if I'm living alone, it may not be that anyone knows that anything is wrong. Whereas if I can see alerts that may come from this sort of sensor, oh, Gina didn't make her tea at 10 like she normally does. Gina didn't, the kitchen didn't heat up like it normally does when Gina makes lunch. Then the independent living officers and social workers can say, wait, we should check on them today.
Yeah.
Right. And it really has changed the way they work. It's made their way of working more efficient. It's becoming the way of working that many of them prefer, and so many of them are transferring to this tool, working it into their budgets and costings moving forward, so that they can have this relationship that isn't invasive, but is still very helpful and informative. And this is also a way that other family members can connect too. They can often monitor the same things, make sure that their family is doing okay. And sometimes the alerts are very helpful to also call emergency services and things like that to help people who have fallen or any other number of things.
So there's a kind of technical aspect that seems to work, but is there a kind of cultural and kind of psychological space as well that could be intrusive, could be questions of consent about understanding what other people are doing,
Yes.
remote monitoring,
Right.
kind of sounds good in one context, but could it be problematic in other ones? In other words, might it stop people doing it,
Yes.
taking it on because they have
So
worries?
the worries and the concerns do stop people from taking it on. However, it is those worries and concerns, while valid, really don't need to be concerns in this case. So what I mean to say is I understand that lots of people are concerned about this sort of monitoring, but the local authorities that are implementing it are very, very careful to make sure that the data is protected according to all relevant laws. So it's not recording anything about you other than, for example, the humidity in your kitchen or the temperature in your kitchen. It helps alert the local authority to things like fuel poverty, to things like injuries or breaks in habit, but it doesn't actually constitute data that most people would find invasive. And it's not shared with anyone about you. No one says, oh, this is what happened to Jules today. Jules didn't like tea this morning.
Or didn't put the heating on. Or
Right,
something.
or didn't put the heating on. It's only shared with emergency services when needed, and it is still only data about things like humidity and heat. And so a lot of people are very comfortable with that. A lot of people say that they forget that the sensors are there, and some report having lots of success and lots of help from these things and these sensors. And of course, if you'd rather not have them, you don't have to have them. You know, a lot of people would just rather not.
So this form of kind of social infrastructure, again, if we kind of use that sort of language, the way that we build resilience around people and sustainability, as you were saying, thinking about harnessing resources for the long term,
Right.
could be having direct effects on people's health, happiness, longevity.
Without a doubt. So one thing about loneliness and disconnectedness is that it is connected to several health conditions. We know that memory problems, dementia problems, these things are exacerbated by being alone and understimulated and by feeling lonely, and that lots of people are happier and have less problems with this sort of condition if they have regular interactions and if they're connected to people. We also know that long-term residential care is less necessary for people who are more connected to their community. And part of that is very functional. If I'm connected to my community, then my neighbors may check on me, they may help me, we may trade favors, maybe I watch their children while they go to the market, but maybe then they help change a light bulb in my home and things like that. And it helps us all be autonomous for longer when we can work together and depend on each other. It also creates a feeling within us that preserving resources for the future is actually important. Because if it isn't, we'll just use them all up now.
Yeah.
And it's completely rational to do that. It's reasonable to do that if we don't have anyone else that we're thinking about. But when we are connected to the community and we see that there will be people in it after we're gone, and there will be resources needed beyond our need for them, then we can feel more responsible and we feel better about reserving some of these resources.
Quite fundamental things are changing then in that kind of context. So we're talking about kind of kindness and generosity, things that stick people together and also can be built upon for the future. So if you were thinking about policy changes on the back of these kind of ideas about how we address long and short-term disasters, how we build social infrastructure, how we think for the future in different kinds of ways, what would be a couple of things that you would want to point towards? What do these ideas say for policy? I mean, I suppose one might be, well, there are definite economic benefits for local authorities because and for public agencies, because keeping people well and out of hospital saves money.
Yes.
For example. So
also, there are economic benefits based on the fact that happier people are more productive in the work that they do and are usually more able to find work that fits them and suits them, which in turn fuels better satisfaction and more productivity. So all of that leads to a more productive economy and less need for social services and public services to fill the gap of economics as well as of social life. One key policy recommendation that I would give to countries outside the UK is to look at the UK loneliness agenda, which has really been an important mechanism to putting things like social prescribing into the NHS plans, but also to alerting the country and alerting regular people that maybe reaching out to someone else is a very small thing you could do that could help us all. One thing that the UK still needs to do is really prioritize connectedness, which is not exactly the same as loneliness. It's very related, but we don't have a connectedness agenda, and that is sort of the next logical step, right? Once we acknowledge that loneliness is a problem for many people, that it has serious health and economic implications, it's time to say, how do we connect people meaningfully in ways that they feel less lonely and we can all reap the benefits of a connected community?
well, on that note of connectedness, Gina Reinhardt from the Department of Government, thank you very much indeed. This is a Brighter Futures film. For more conversations on how ideas improve lives, pop over to our sister podcast, Louder Than Words.